Hey, what is up, mortals? It is I, the Silent Sheepdog, here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 4 of What If Deku Had the System. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying, sit back, relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. The school day had been chaotic, to say the least. Not only had the press swarmed the gates, they managed to cause a panic when breaking into campus. Luckily, the situation had been diffused quickly. Aizawa and President Mike managed to deal with the reporters, while Izuku dealt with panicked students. The day went on as it should have, with the green-haired boy fully embracing his role as class representative. He did consider passing the title over to Yayorozu, since she openly admitted to wanting it, but reconsidered. The reason for this was that it could be beneficial on his end. He could apply what he already knew about leadership while also improving with new experiences. Shortly after this, the day ended, and everyone made their ways home. Izuku was accompanied by both Ida and Uraraka, as usual, talking about what had happened that day. They began endlessly praising him for controlling the crowd with such ease, but the green-haired boy could do nothing but hide how awkward it made him feel. Their conversations were cut short, however, when they finally had to part ways. "I guess this is where we separate. I'll see you guys tomorrow," Izuku said with a smile. Uraraka smiled back at him before saying,
"Yeah, see you tomorrow, Deku,"
with a joyous tone, which was followed by a formal, "Indeed, till we meet again, Midoriya," from Ida. The teens finally went their separate ways, leaving Izuku by himself. He, however, didn't intend to go home just yet. He had business to attend to, and its potential gravity could not be ignored. The teen scanned his surroundings carefully, making sure that he was alone before entering a secluded alleyway. "Igris, are you there?" the young monarch then asked, right after entering the comforting darkness. He quickly got a response, as the familiar Shadow Knight arose from his shadow. "I am here, my liege," Igris said, after kneeling before his master. Izuku felt relief upon hearing this, for it meant that there had been no obstacles along the way. "Good. What did you find?" the master asked, his dominant voice showing a hint of his relief. Igris held his head low, and then he answered with a heavy voice. "Not much, my liege." Izuku was confused now, for it sounded like Igris was disappointed. "Would you please elaborate?" the green-haired boy asked, hoping to find the source of this disappointment. Igris sighed heavily as he responded. "When I arrived at the metal gate, I found it in tatters. It had been reduced to no more than a pile of rust, implying some form of decay. I couldn't find the person responsible. Therefore, I couldn't figure out what they were after." Izuku went silent upon hearing this. It wasn't that he was disappointed, he was concerned. This wasn't just a prank. It was planned too carefully. The people responsible were after something, and the invading reporters had given them the cover they needed. "Are the soldiers in position?" Izuku then asked, his voice showing his concern. Igris didn't expect this, but he composed himself before saying, "Yes, the students in Class 1A have been assigned one shadow soldier each," with a calm voice. Igris was certain that his master would be satisfied with this, only to be mistaken. "What about Aizawa?" the green-haired boy asked, sounding just as cold and formal as he usually did. Igris was confused by this, as he explained himself. "My liege, I was told to assign every member of your class their own protective shadow soldier. You must forgive me, for I didn't know that your teacher was to be included," the Shadow Knight said, trying to sound as reasonable as possible. Izuku wasn't upset with him. He just sighed while pinching the bridge of his nose, saying, "Okay, I want at least 2 soldiers placed on him. While we're at it, also put at least 1 each on the rest of UA's faculty. Then when the opportunity arises, I want 3 constantly keeping tabs on All Might." With a rather heavy voice, Igris listened to all of his commands, but his attention was quickly drawn to the obvious burden in his master's voice. The Shadow Knight stood up from his kneeling position before speaking up. "Is everything all right, my liege?" he asked, sounding rather concerned. Izuku tried to brush it off by saying, "I'm fine, Igris." But his voice didn't lie. "My liege, you can talk to me if there's something burdening you." Igris then said, sounding as gentle as he could. Izuku let out an even heavier sigh than before as he decided to speak his mind. I am concerned, Igris. This person is clearly after something, and I don't know what. Not only that, I don't know if they're working alone or what they're capable of. So I'm concerned about what they might do, not just for the school's sake. Whatever might happen in the future could compromise us, Izuku said, his burdened voice becoming more prominent than before. Igris was shocked upon hearing this. He didn't know what the future would hold for them, but he didn't think that it would be so concerning. His master was exercising every bit of caution that he could muster because he feared that their secret would be revealed. The Shadow Knight didn't know what to say in response to this. He only remained silent and listened to his master's final words. I sense something foul approaching, and I don't like it one bit. The next day was much calmer than the previous. The students went through their regular classes until it was time for hero training once again. This time, they were told that it was going to be rescue training at an off-campus facility, and that hero costumes were optional. The class got excited as usual, and went to prepare themselves. Shortly after, they all boarded the bus that was supposed to take them to this new facility, which made Izuku nervous. The revelation from the previous day was still fresh in his mind, and it continued to worry him. What bothered him the most right now was that if something did happen, he wouldn't be able to use Top Performer, since the title only worked on UA's grounds.
Hey, Midoriya.
A voice then called out, knocking Izuku out of his thoughts. The green-haired boy looked up to see that it was Asui, looking like she wanted to ask him a question.
What is your quirk exactly?
The frog girl asked, sounding curious as she did. Izuku was calm upon hearing this, and he simply answered. My quirk is just telekinesis. Asui seemed to get even more curious now, as she then asked,
Then what about the heroes versus villains exercise? You managed to withstand Bakugo's biggest explosion, and you move faster than normal.
With a voice that reflected her curiosity. Izuku was once again unaffected. He expected this question to arise at some point, so he had already prepared an answer. I just have better control over my quirk. I often use it on myself to enhance my strength and speed, so same goes for the explosion. I just use my quirk to disperse it, he said, just as calmly as before. Everyone was stunned to hear this, wondering how Izuku managed to gain so much control over his quirk. That's our class rep for you. He's so manly. I'm surprised that Bakugo managed to beat you in the entrance exam, Kirishima then proudly announced. There were a few that seemed to agree with this statement, all while Izuku tried to keep his composure after being praised. Bakugo, however, was very annoyed by it, for it implied that he was weaker than Izuku. He didn't say anything, though, as Izuku responded to Kirishima. You might be praising me too much, and I don't care about Bakugo. I never cared about the ranking in the entrance exam. It's narrow-minded, and it doesn't actually speak for your abilities, the green-haired boy said. Bakugo got furious upon hearing this, as he shouted, What the hell did you say? You! But was immediately cut off by an unwanted angry voice shouting, Shut your mouth! Out of nowhere. Everyone jumped after hearing this, all wondering where the voice had come from. Izuku placed his foot on his shadow before breaking the silence. I agree with whoever said that. Bakugo, I suggest that you shut up before I shut you up, he said, his voice being cold and irritated. Everyone was thrown off by this tone. It wasn't what they recognized from Izuku. Bakugo backed off after hearing this, looking slightly intimidated. It wasn't just Izuku's tone. It was how he referred to him. He had stopped calling him Kachan, which could only mean that he had lost what little respect he had for him.
How is no one freaking out?
A whining voice cried out. Everyone turned to see that it was a boy with purple balls for hair, the same one that had gotten last place in the fitness test. This is the third time that voice has appeared, and no one's questioning it? I swear this class is haunted. The boy then cried out, whining even more as he did. No one seemed to be bothered by this, and it only served to ease Izuku. That is, when the green-haired boy looked towards his shadow once again, only to see what he imagined to be a grin on Igris's face. He didn't get to have another thought about it before watching the knight maneuver over to the whining boy's shadow. Next thing he knew, the boy screamed and panicked after feeling someone touch his neck. This prompted Izuku to burst out laughing, all while saying, "God bless you!" to both Igris and the whining boy. Now everyone looked at Izuku in confusion, for they didn't understand why he was laughing. Among those, there was one pair of eyes that stood out from the rest. Those eyes belonged to none other than Dark Shadow, who seemed to look more skeptical than ever before. You seem to be very calm about it," it said, its voice radiating skepticism. Izuku was a little confused by this, as he asked, "Huh? What do you mean?" With a calm voice. Dark Shadow didn't get any less suspicious, as it then explained, "Everyone here has heard that voice on multiple occasions. And they all seem to be confused and bothered by it. You, on the other hand, never seem confused. Every time that voice shows up, you get visibly irritated, as if you know what it is. Not only that, it only ever shows up when you're around." With the same voice as before. These words appeared to prompt a little suspicion from the others, but Izuku remained calm through it. He was a little worried, though, as he realized that some of his past behavior may have justified this type of reaction. It only seemed to get worse, however, as Dark Shadow then locked its gaze towards Izuku's shadow. "What are you exactly?" the dark creature then asked, as its gaze got turned back to the green-haired boy. Now, Izuku could say one thing for certain. Dark Shadow couldn't be fooled. It might not know about the Shadow Soldiers, but it could probably sense their presence. Somehow. Izuku took a deep breath, calming his nerves as he did before speaking up. "I don't understand what you're after. There really isn't anything special about me. I'm like a book. I am exactly what I appear to be," the green-haired boy said, sounding about as calm as before. While no one wanted to argue with this, Dark Shadow wasn't satisfied, as it asked, "So, it's up to interpretation then," while sounding more critical as time passed. These words both intrigued and confused most, while Izuku didn't like their implication. "Books can be taken at face value, as you say, but they can also be analyzed for deeper meanings. When it comes to books, they can be up to interpretation. Just like you. To Fumikage, you may appear to be competent. To Red Hair over there, you're tough and deserve respect. And to Gravity Girl, you might be the hottest person alive. Everyone here sees you differently," Dark Shadow then explained, its voice sounding more serious than it had before. Everyone thought that it had a point, even those who had been embarrassed. Izuku, however, suddenly gave a different aura. His eyes were cold and serious. His figure was imposing, despite sitting down. To top it all off, his expression was unlike what they had seen before. Right now, everyone could only find one word to describe the air that he gave off. That of a cold-hearted king. Everyone was silently staring at this king, as he then responded to Dark Shadow's words. "I believe that there's another fly in my presence. I could easily swat it away, but I think that I'll entertain it. Just this once," he said, his voice perfectly matching what he was. Shivers ran down everyone's spine as Izuku looked at Dark Shadow before continuing with a question of his own. "If I am a book, what's my title? What are my contents? And most importantly, what do you read between my lines?" This made everyone, including the dark creature, freeze up. The intimidation behind Izuku's words was terrifying, as if that alone could bring silence to a cacophony. This made one thing very clear to them all. Izuku didn't expect them to answer his question. He didn't want them to answer. This video is sponsored by NordVPN. Staying safe online is an ever-growing difficulty, and hackers could exploit you. NordVPN allows you to change your IP address, making you harder to track, securing your privacy. In addition to providing you with safe passage through the web, you can also expand the reach of your favorite streaming services. Are you tired of going through 2, 3, or even 4 streaming services to watch your favorite anime? Well, with NordVPN, you can change your country and be able to binge shows like My Hero Academia, Naruto, and many others on your favorite streaming service with just the press of a button. Check out the link in the description to get 72% off when buying for 2 years, $3.29 a month. This deal is for a limited time. And thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Quiet down. We're here, Aizawa then announced, breaking the heavy silence. The students were still a little frozen, but they all collected themselves before exiting the bus. They then followed Aizawa into an odd-looking building, where the Pro Hero 13 was waiting. Some students, including Izuku, started getting excited upon seeing the rescue hero, but they were confused about something. Aizawa had previously told them that All Might would be joining them for this class, but the symbol of peace was nowhere to be seen. As if they were responding to this thought, Aizawa entered a quiet conversation with 13. Izuku couldn't hear what they were saying, but judging by their mannerisms and the knowledge that he had acquired just recently, he could get a grasp of it. The two pro-heroes were talking about how All Might had used up too much of his time, and that he wouldn't be able to attend. Their conversation then ended quickly, as 13 explained the basics of the facility. It was called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short, and was built to simulate different types of disasters for the sake of rescue training. 13 then proceeded to give a lecture about how quirks are dangerous, and, in the wrong hands, could be used to kill others. Izuku listened to this carefully, wanting to pick up whatever he could. Within his shadow was Igris, patiently waiting behind his master. The lecture went on, but Igris didn't act up. He remained silent throughout the entire experience, until he noticed something odd. In what looked to be a plaza inside the facility, he could see a dark mass of mist getting formed. That alone was odd, but it only got worse when countless menacing figures suddenly stepped outside of it. Instantly alarmed by these events, Igris turned back to his master and whispered, "My liege, there's something," but was immediately interrupted by Izuku, who whispered, "Igris, I thought I told you to shut up!" The shadow couldn't calm down in his urgency, as he then attempted to speak again, "But my liege," only to be cut off once more, but this time it wasn't Izuku. "Awesome! We even get fake villains!" Kirishima then exclaimed in excitement. This brought Izuku to attention as he turned around to see what was happening. What he saw made him realize that Igris wasn't messing around. At the bottom of the stairs were an army of what looked to be villains. Most of the students might have thought that they were fake, but not Izuku. He had been through enough battles to be able to tell what real bloodthirst looked like. "Everyone evacuate immediately! Those villains aren't fake!" The green-haired boy shouted, his voice showing a clear hint of urgency. The others were confused by this, for they didn't know if Izuku was right or not. It wasn't until Aizawa spoke up that they got their answer. "Midoriya's right. Everyone, get out of here now!" the tired teacher shouted as he ran up to the stairs. This prompted the students to start moving, finally realizing how serious the situation was. Izuku lagged behind the others as he looked towards Aizawa. The teacher was readying himself to fight, despite knowing that he was out of his element. The green-haired boy wanted to ask if he would be okay, but quickly realized that it didn't matter, because Aizawa was going to fight regardless of his circumstances. Instead, he opted to say, "Sir, be careful," with a serious tone. Aizawa only nodded as a response before putting on his goggles. Izuku was then going to join his classmates, but stopped when Aizawa said, "Midoriya, you're the class rep, so I trust you to get everyone to safety," with an equally serious tone. Izuku didn't give a verbal response, he only nodded as the tired hero charged into battle. Now, Izuku hurried to catch up with his classmates, but he was still far behind them. It didn't matter, however, for the exit had been blocked. In front of them was the same mass of dark mist that had supposedly brought the villains inside. It towered above them, spreading its massive body in front of them as two narrow eyes appeared within it. Izuku remained calm upon seeing this thing even after it started talking. He didn't know what this thing could do, but all he needed was a window of opportunity to get everyone out. "My liege," the voice of Igris then whispered, but Izuku kept looking at the villain while silently prompting the shadow to continue. "It appears to have some sort of metallic collar within that mist. I believe that could be its real body," he then whispered. Izuku didn't change his expression, he only nodded. He hadn't seen this collar with his own eyes, but he didn't doubt its existence. This made him slowly walk up to the others, pulling out his serrated dagger known as Night Killer, before whispering, "Be ready. If an opening shows itself, we attack." Igris didn't object to this, remaining within the shadow of his master, who walked closer to the enemy. This situation was dire. Anyone could tell that. The other students were all trembling with fear, and 13 seemed unsure of what to do. Izuku, however, knew what he needed to do, and he felt no fear. He was the class representative, and it was his duty to protect his classmates. And he had no intention to fail. The green-haired boy shut out everything around him, turning the world into a quiet vacuum. The sound that could be heard was two beating hearts, his own and that of his enemy. He waited and waited for that moment, that split second where the enemy would slip up. He continued to wait, listening to the unsynchronized heartbeats. Then it happened. For just one beat, the hearts were synchronized, and the moment that Izuku had been waiting for was right there in front of him. The window stood wide open. The green-haired boy charged, Igris following in his shadow, readying himself to strike. This is what he had been waiting for. He couldn't miss this chance. But he missed it. As if waking from a dream, the sound of an explosion could be heard. Suddenly, Izuku could hear everything in his surroundings. The mist villain had been knocked back, and Izuku could see who had done it. It was Bakugo and Kirishima. They had made it up before he did. The students seemed to calm down after seeing this, but Izuku didn't. It wasn't over yet. If it really was that easy to defeat this villain, they would have been outside by now. "You idiots!" Izuku angrily cursed under his breath, as exactly the thing that he had predicted happened. The villain rose up once more, unaffected by the previous attack. Despair returned to the students, and the villain had had enough. It wrapped its body around the students, covering them in darkness. It was hard to see anything, but Izuku could barely tell that his classmates were being teleported away at random. Luckily, he was dragged out of the darkness before he could meet the same fate. "My liege, are you all right?" Igris then whispered, sounding worried. Izuku gathered himself before realizing that Igris must have dragged him out of the mist before saying, "I'm fine. Thanks," with a quiet voice. Izuku then looked and assessed the situation. Some students had been teleported away, but not all of them. 13 had managed to force the villain back with her quirk, but it wasn't perfect. The mass of mist was still there, and it was still blocking the exit. "We won't last long like this. We need to call for help somehow," 13 then exclaimed, her voice showing a clear sign of worry. Izuku agreed with her, and he had an idea of how to do it. The green-haired boy pulled himself back to his feet before speaking up. "I have an idea. If we can clear a path, we can send Ida out there to get help," he said with a serious tone. 13 was intrigued by this, as she asked, "How do you suggest we do that?" quite curiously. Izuku kept his serious expression as he answered, "My quirk is telekinesis. I can give Ida a boost of speed, so that he can run for an exit much faster. What I can't do is keep that villain at bay, especially not while focusing on Ida. That's where you come in. Use your black hole to grab his attention. You don't have to defeat him as long as the path gets cleared for a short while." Everyone present, including the students and 13, were impressed. It wasn't just that Izuku managed to spontaneously conjure up a plan. He was calm. It was as if he was used to these types of situations. 13 quickly agreed to the plan, but Ida was still worried. "Midoriya, I can't just leave you behind like that," the blue-haired teen said, his voice showing that he was still afraid. Izuku was unchanged by this as he responded by saying, Ida, you're our fastest runner. You can get help the quickest out of everyone here, while remaining calm. Ida was still worried as he then said, but, only to be cut off by Izuku, who said, Ida, I'm your class representative, and as your class representative, I order you to run, and don't look back, with a colder voice than before. Ida, after hearing this, he wanted to talk back, but he couldn't. Izuku was right, so he couldn't argue against him. Izuku took a deep breath after this. He didn't know if this would work, but he could only hope that it would. Not only that, he worried for a little for the ones that had just been sent away. He didn't know if they could handle themselves, but they should be fine. If things went sideways before backup arrived, he would simply need to step out of the shadows once and for all. He took another deep breath before speaking. All right, let's begin. Thank you all for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information that you will ever need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects that our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye, and have a divine day.